Curiosity drifted through the winter air the moment Alara Wren stepped off the jolting stagecoach, her boots sinking into the snow as though the earth itself wished to keep her. She lifted her gaze to the towering silhouette waiting for her. Colt Harland, the mountain man whispered about in every dusty saloon and porch-front gossip circle. His presence was an unsettling blend of silence and strength, a man carved from pine roots and old grief, a man people feared without ever truly knowing. Alara studied him carefully, searching for a sign, any sign, that she had not traded one cruel fate for another. Colt observed her with an unreadable stillness, as if memorizing the outline of someone he had been expecting in a dream rather than in life. Snow clung to his dark coat, gathering at his shoulders like quiet burdens he'd simply grown used to carrying. He touched the brim of his hat in greeting but offered no words. Yet there was no impatience in him, no hardness in his expression, only a steady, measuring calm that made her breath catch in her throat. Alara felt the familiar weight of inadequacy tightening around her ribs. She had been called fragile for so long that fragility had begun to feel like her only identity. Her father's last words echoed in her mind, "A helpless girl needs a strong man, and he's the only one who'll have you." It stung even now, days later, bruising the hope she tried so desperately to keep alive. Colt extended a hand to help her onto the wagon, and she hesitated, not because she feared him, but because she feared her own trembling. Still, she placed her hand in his, expecting roughness or indifference. Instead, his grip was firm yet careful, like someone accustomed to handling breakable things and determined not to break another. He guided her up with steady ease, and for a fleeting moment, she sensed a gentleness that contradicted every rumor she had heard. They rode in silence, the only sound the creaking wheels and the distant call of ravens circling the pines. The cold wind brushed against Alara's cheeks, but the quiet beside Colt felt warmer than she'd anticipated. She wanted to speak but could not find the right words, and she sensed he would not welcome idle chatter. Yet she also sensed he was not avoiding conversation out of arrogance. Silence simply seemed to be the language he trusted most. As they neared the foothills, the last traces of town life faded behind them. The mountains rose around her, immense and breath-stealing, their snow-dusted peaks glowing faintly beneath the pale winter sun. This land felt ancient, untouched, almost sacred, far from the crowded, judgmental eyes she had left behind. Still, curiosity tugged at her. Who was this man who chose a life so removed from everything familiar? What had driven him upward into the cold, away from human warmth? Colt stopped the wagon before a sturdy cabin built of heavy timber, its design practical yet unexpectedly inviting. Smoke drifted from the chimney in slow spirals, carrying with it the scent of cedar and something faintly sweet, perhaps pine tea. Alara stepped down, her breath forming small clouds as she scanned her new home. The cabin's windows glowed with soft lamplight, and the surrounding forest hummed with quiet life beneath the snow. Nothing about it felt threatening. If anything, it felt like someone had tended it with care. Colt opened the door for her but did not step inside first. His gesture, silent, deferential, unsettled her more than any harshness would have. People had always pushed her aside, spoken over her, dismissed her, but this man moved as if her presence mattered. She entered the warm interior, noting the polished floorboards, the pine shelves lined with books, and the strong scent of burning wood curled into every corner. Everything was neat, orderly, prepared. Not for show, she thought, but for living. "This is yours," Colt said quietly, nodding toward a small room off the main space. His voice startled her. It was deep, surprisingly gentle, and shaped by a restraint that hinted at old wounds. "If anything's missing, tell me." Then he stepped back, almost as if afraid of crowding her. Alara lingered in the doorway of her room, studying the simple furnishings, a small bed with quilts folded neatly, a wooden dresser, a tiny window overlooking the trees. Someone had taken the time to smooth the bedding and place a lantern where her hand could easily reach it. Such care unsettled her more than neglect ever had. Care demanded trust, and trust had always betrayed her. Over the next few days, their lives settled into a tentative rhythm. Colt rose early, chopping wood in the cold while she prepared modest meals. He never asked her to work beyond her strength, never commented on her quietness. She, in turn, watched the way he moved through the world, slow, deliberate, thoughtful. The man she'd been warned about, the man called heartless and fearsome, did not match the one who knocked snow off his boots before entering or left extra wood by her door without a word. Still, Ilara could not silence her apprehension. A life lived in survival mode taught her that kindness always came with conditions. She waited for his disappointment, for the first hint that she was too weak or too inexperienced for the mountain life. But Colt simply carried on, measuring his days by what needed doing, not by what he demanded of her. During a trip to town for supplies, whispers trailed them like shadows. Women hid their curiosity behind polite smiles. Men lowered their voices when Colt passed. Ilara felt exposed again, reminded of how the world loved to judge what it did not understand. She glanced at Colt, expecting irritation, but he seemed unaffected, as if gossip belonged to a world he had long since abandoned. For the first time, she wondered if strength didn't always roar. Sometimes, it simply refused to bend. That night, as snow fell in soft layers outside the cabin, Ilara watched Colt place a repaired glove on the table. Her glove, torn days earlier. He said nothing. She said nothing. But something in the smallness of the gesture, in the quiet offering of effort and time, tightened the air between them. Curiosity rose again, no longer cautious but hopeful. She wondered, not fearfully, but with a growing ache, what secrets this silent man carried. And more importantly, why he treated her not as a burden delivered to him, but as someone who mattered in ways she did not yet understand. She went to sleep wishing she knew the story behind his eyes, unaware that the answer would soon shape everything between them. Snow drifted against the cabin walls the morning Colt asked Ilara to follow him. His voice held a quiet gravity, as though whatever he wished to show her had waited in silence for far too long. She wrapped her shawl tighter and stepped outside, watching him move ahead with a measured pace, his boots sinking into the fresh powder. Curiosity stirred again, gentler this time, threaded with a yearning she didn't dare name. He led her through the pines, where sunlight filtered through branches laden with white. The world felt suspended, every sound softened beneath winter's hush. Ilara studied Colt's shoulders as he walked, broad yet slightly tense, as if bracing himself for something he could not fully predict. She sensed a shift in him, a vulnerability pressed between each step. He was not a man accustomed to revealing anything he didn't have to, and yet here he was, guiding her deeper into the mountains with intent she could almost feel pulsing in the cold air. A narrow trail appeared ahead, carved cleanly through the drifts. Ilara realized it had not formed by chance. Colt had cleared it, likely days or weeks before she arrived. Her heartbeat quickened. The trail wound gently upward until it reached a small clearing where the sunlight landed in a perfect oval of pale gold. There, nestled against a cluster of evergreens, stood a small cabin unlike the rugged home she had been living in. This one was softer in appearance, almost tender in its craftsmanship. Carved wildflowers framed the doorway, their petals shaped with a delicacy surprising for the hand of a man known for solitude and storms. Ilara paused, unable to step forward. Something in the structure called to her, but she feared believing in anything that might crumble under hope. Colt exhaled, the breath catching slightly. "I built it," he said, his voice low, as if admitting a confession. "Before I knew who'd come into my life." He approached the door and pushed it open, revealing a space washed in gentle light. "But I built it for someone who needed something of her own." Ilara entered slowly. The interior smelled of cedar and fresh timber, with shelves lining the walls, waiting to be filled. A small stove stood in the corner, its iron polished. A wooden table sat near a window facing the sunrise. The craftsmanship was unmistakable, every angle sanded smooth, every beam fitted with care. It felt like stepping into the warm echo of a long-forgotten wish. Her throat tightened. "Why would you make this?" she whispered, afraid her voice might break the fragile air between them. Colt stepped beside her but did not touch her. "Because I knew," he answered, "that if someone ever came into my life again, she wouldn't come with ease or trust. She'd come carrying hurt." He paused, the silence stretching like a held breath. "I wanted her to have a place untouched by judgment, a place that belonged only to her." Ilara turned toward him, searching his face. Beneath his steady composure, she saw the faint shadow of old sorrow. Sorrow he had never spoken of but had lived with far longer than she'd been alive. "You built all this, without knowing who she'd be?" "I built it hoping she'd feel safe," he replied. "Even if she never felt safe with me." The honesty in that admission unsettled Alara more deeply than any silence ever had. For the first time, she realized his restraint had never been indifference. It had been respect, quiet, unwavering, and misunderstood by everyone except the man who lived it. A sudden gust of wind swept snow across the clearing, signaling a storm rolling in from the ridge. Colt glanced at the sky, then back at her. "We should stay here until it passes. The trail will disappear once the wind picks up." Inside the small cabin, the storm's rising voice circled them like a restless spirit. Colt lit the stove, its warmth filling the room slowly. Alara watched him from the table, noticing the slight tremor in his hands as he adjusted the flue. It was a small tremor, barely noticeable, but it revealed more than words ever could. He wasn't afraid of the storm. He was afraid of her reaction. That truth softened something tightly wound inside her. She rose from the chair and approached him, each step deliberate. When she reached him, she paused, then lightly placed her fingertips on his sleeve. The contact was feather-light, yet the moment felt immense, as if the entire room drew breath at once. Colt looked down at her hand, then lifted his eyes to hers. He didn't speak, but he didn't pull away either. His stillness felt like an invitation, one that asked nothing and offered everything. Alara's voice came barely above a whisper. "You treat me as if I matter." "You do," he said simply. "More than you know." The stove crackled softly, casting shifting patterns of light across the wooden walls. The storm continued to howl outside, but inside, warmth grew in quiet layers, unrushed, unforced, undeniable. Alara felt something steadying inside her, something she had thought lost to years of being dismissed and traded like an unwanted possession. "Colt," she said, her voice steadier, "I was so afraid. Not of you, but of hoping again." His expression softened, a rare light touching the edges of his features. "Hope doesn't break people," he murmured. "What breaks us is believing we don't deserve it." She stepped closer, closing the small distance that had existed more in emotion than space. He lowered his head slightly, allowing her presence to settle into his awareness like a new truth. They stood there, neither rushing, both learning the shape of something fragile and profound. When the storm finally quieted, the clearing outside shimmered under a new coat of snow. Alara moved toward the window, gazing out at the untouched landscape. Behind her, Colt spoke with a gentleness that wrapped around her like a warm blanket. "If you want this place," he said, "it's yours. Whenever you choose. With me nearby, or with me far. I won't bind you to my life unless you want to stay." Alara turned, her heart steady for the first time in years. "I want to stay," she said. "Not because I must. Because being here, being with you, feels like breathing without pain." Colt's eyes closed briefly, as if releasing a weight he had carried too long. When he opened them again, there was a warmth there that transformed his entire face. The snow glowed softly around the cabin, the world hushed and new. And in that quiet, Alara felt the truth settle deep within her. This was not the life she had been given. This was the life she had discovered, one built by patience, steadiness, and a man who offered safety before love, and love only when she was ready to receive it. And it was, at last, a beginning.